Maybe the soul isn't trying to reach heaven. Maybe heaven has always been trying to reach you. Maybe heaven isn't where we go. Maybe it's what we become. When the body grows quiet, when the noise of the world begins to fade, something beautiful happens. A silence begins to breathe. It's the same silence you hear in the rain, the same stillness between two heartbeats. We've been told to look upward, toward the stars, the clouds, the light beyond the clouds. But what if the real journey was inward? What if heaven was never a destination, but a recognition, a remembering of who we've always been beneath the noise? Maybe the souls we've lost aren't gone. Maybe they've just stepped into the quiet place we visit every time we close our eyes in peace. Every time we forgive. Every time we love without expecting anything in return. That's where heaven begins, not in the skies, but in the moments that make your heart widen and your ego dissolve. The ancients said the soul is like a drop returning to the ocean. It doesn't disappear, it becomes the ocean. Maybe that's what happens to us too. When our stories end, we don't vanish, we expand. Have you ever noticed how we keep looking up, searching for something that feels like home? We call it heaven. A word so light, and yet, it carries the weight of everything we've ever lost. They told us heaven is above, somewhere past the stars, hidden behind clouds of mercy and mystery. But maybe we've been looking in the wrong direction all along. What if heaven isn't up there? What if it's in here, in the quiet spaces between two heartbeats, in the warmth left behind after someone we love has gone? Every now and then, life gives us moments that feel too beautiful to belong to this world. Moments where time stops, where you're not thinking, not remembering, not fearing, just being. Maybe that's heaven, not eternal clouds, but eternal presence. We spend our lives running toward what we think we've lost: peace, forgiveness, connection. But what if heaven was never a reward waiting at the end of suffering? What if it was the gentle awareness that right now, in this breath, you're already home? The truth is, heaven has always been within reach. Every time we choose to love instead of judge. Every time we choose silence over chaos. Every time we remember someone not with pain, but with peace. That's not the promise of heaven. That is heaven. And maybe that's what our souls have been trying to tell us all along. Maybe heaven isn't above us. Maybe it's within us, waiting to be remembered, waiting to be lived. There was once an old man named Elias. He lived in a quiet wooden house at the edge of a forgotten road, the kind of place where time moved slower than the wind. Every morning, he'd sit by the same window, waiting for heaven. Camera slowly moves around him, teacups steaming, birds outside, his hands holding an old Bible with worn pages. He wasn't waiting to die, not exactly. He was waiting for the promise he'd carried all his life. The promise that one day, after enough prayers, enough good deeds, enough patience, heaven would open its gates and peace would finally come. But when Margaret passed away, something in the air changed. The silence became heavier. The prayers felt longer. And the house emptier. Elias started writing letters to her. Not to send, just to remember. Letters about the garden that refused to bloom. About how the tea didn't taste the same. About how heaven still felt too far away. One morning he wrote something different. A single line. He wrote, "Maybe heaven is not where she went. Maybe it's what she left behind." That day, for the first time in months, Elias stepped outside. The sky was pale and endless, the kind of morning where light feels alive. He heard birds singing in the trees, the same ones his wife used to feed. The garden had bloomed again, small yellow flowers breaking through the soil like forgotten blessings. And suddenly he felt it, not in the sky, not in the clouds, but in the space between his breath and the world around him. That same warmth he used to feel when she smiled. That same stillness she brought into every room. He looked up, not searching this time, but seeing. The wind brushed against his face like a familiar touch. He whispered, "You never left, did you?" From that morning on, Elias stopped waiting for heaven. He started living it. He began talking to strangers again. He repaired the old bird feeder. He taught a boy down the road how to plant marigolds. And sometimes he'd laugh for no reason, the kind of laugh that sounds like forgiveness that he never stopped writing to her. But his letters changed. They became thank yous. Not for the years they had, but for the heaven they'd already built together. One cup of tea, one sunrise, one heartbeat at a time. Maybe heaven isn't the place we go after we've done living. Maybe it's what begins to grow inside us when we finally understand love, the kind that doesn't end when a heartbeat does. Elias thought heaven was a destination, a perfect place you reach after life's storms have passed. But maybe heaven was never about where you go. Maybe it's about what awakens inside you when you stop searching. That we were all taught to look upward for meaning. But science tells us there's no up or down in the universe, only within and beyond. And maybe the same is true for the soul. What if heaven isn't a place waiting in the clouds, but a consciousness waiting in silence? A vibration of peace that already exists inside every human being. Psychologists call it flow, neuroscientists call it gamma coherence, mystics call it awakening. Different languages for the same truth, that there are moments where we transcend the mind's noise and touch something timeless. It's in the way your chest softens when you forgive someone. It's in that single tear that falls, not from sadness, but from recognition. It's in those few seconds when you're watching the sunset and everything feels too beautiful to name. Heaven, perhaps, is not the afterlife. It's life after ego. It begins the moment we stop defining ourselves by pain and start remembering that we were never separate from the light. When Elias realized that, he didn't just see heaven, he became it. The light in his room wasn't divine, it was ordinary sunlight. But the awareness looking at it was sacred. Because heaven isn't a realm we enter, it's a frequency we remember. Think about it. Every religion, every philosophy, every science, all pointing in one direction, toward unity. The idea that everything we've been searching for out there has been quietly breathing in here. When you hold someone's hand and truly see them, not their name, not their past, not their mistakes, but their soul, that moment is heaven. When you forgive yourself for the things you can't change, that's heaven too. Because heaven is not built from golden walls. It's made from moments of truth. Moments when the soul remembers what the mind forgot. That love never needed a location to exist. So maybe Elias didn't find heaven at all. Maybe he simply stopped looking for it, and in that surrender, he became what he was always meant to find. Heaven is not beyond death. It's beyond illusion. And once you see that, you realize the distance between you and eternity was never more than a breath. Science says the universe began with a sound, a vibration, an eternal hum that expanded into stars, galaxies, and us. But what if that same vibration still lives inside everything, including you? When we look deep into the human brain under an fMRI scanner, scientists see something extraordinary. During moments of deep prayer, forgiveness, or awe, the regions responsible for self-dissolve. The mind becomes quiet, and the body emits patterns almost identical to when we experience love. Maybe that's not coincidence. Maybe heaven isn't a place beyond life. Maybe it's the state of consciousness when life and divinity become one. The mystics called it union. The monks called it enlightenment. The poets called it coming home. All of them, across centuries and continents, spoke of the same invisible truth, that there's something eternal within us that cannot die, cannot break, cannot fade. Quantum physics calls it energy. Spirituality calls it spirit. Different words, same essence. Energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. And so, maybe death isn't an ending, but a continuation in another frequency of being. Elias's story reminds us that the journey to heaven was never about escaping the human experience. It was about seeing the divine through it. Because maybe when you love deeply, when you sit beside someone in silence, feeling their presence more than their words, you are already touching that eternal field where everything is connected. There's a sacred intelligence in the way life unfolds, in how pain transforms into compassion, how endings create space for beginning, how every death gives birth to a deeper kind of life. Heaven, perhaps, was never up there. It's here, in the invisible fabric of consciousness that holds the stars together and keeps your heart beating. Maybe the soul isn't trying to reach heaven. Maybe heaven has always been trying to reach you. Maybe heaven isn't where we go. Maybe it's what we become. When the body grows quiet, when the noise of the world begins to fade, something beautiful happens. A silence begins to breathe. It's the same silence you hear in the rain, the same stillness between two heartbeats. We've been told to look upward, toward the stars, the clouds, the light beyond the clouds. But what if the real journey was inward? What if heaven was never a destination, but a recognition, a remembering of who we've always been beneath the noise? Maybe the souls we've lost aren't gone. Maybe they've just stepped into the quiet place we visit every time we close our eyes in peace. Every time we forgive. Every time we love without expecting anything in return. That's where heaven begins, not in the skies, but in the moments that make your heart widen and your ego dissolve. The ancients said the soul is like a drop returning to the ocean. It doesn't disappear, it becomes the ocean. Maybe that's what happens to us too. When our stories end, we don't vanish, we expand. Heaven isn't a reward for living well. It's the understanding that you were never separate from it. You were part of it all along. In every act of kindness, in every tear shed with love, in every breath that connected you to something larger than yourself. So when you look at the night sky, don't ask where heaven is. Feel it, in the light behind your eyes, in the warmth still moving through your chest. Because maybe heaven was never above us. It was always within us.